the 411 on Team 119, proudly presented by Margaritaville Island Hotel and the Saint Somewhere Spa in Pigeon Forge, exclusively on RTI TV.
Welcome to RTI TV. It's time for another edition of the 411 on Team 119, brought to you exclusively by Margaritaville and the Saint Somewhere Spa in Pigeon Forge. I'm Reed Carringer alongside former Tennessee defensive lineman Will Overstreet, and Will's here today to talk about the front seven for the Vols. Will, welcome to the program.
Glad to be here. I can't wait to be here to talk about my favorite subject, the front seven of the defensive line, guys that get after the quarterback. It's got to be a great day when you talk about that.
Here's the format. Here's how we got the 411 on Team 119. We're going to ask you 4 questions about the Vols this season and then ask you to give us your one big concern and one bold prediction for Tennessee. And first up, there's been a ton of talk about a few highly touted freshman defensive linemen for the Vols. Khalil McKenzie, Shai Tuttle, Kyle Phillips joining the team. How big of a role can they play on the field for Tennessee this fall?
Huge role. I tell you what, these guys are the kinds of freshmen you want coming in. They're the kind that make your team good for so many years to come. Now the question is what kind of impact what is that level of impact that people think they should be able to make? Because if you're looking for more Derek Barnett's, let's just put it in terms of what that was. His level of production last year was so much farther great than even some of the greatest that have ever played at Tennessee. John Anderson only had 4 sacks and about 40 tackles his first year. Another great one, Reggie White, 2 sacks, 53 tackles. And let's face it, Albert Hainsworth, he only had about that production level of 20 tackles for a loss in his whole career, his whole 3 years there. So if you're expecting the greatness of Derek Barnett from these guys, you're putting them at too high a level. But if you're expecting them to be able to contribute and show up and show you what they're going to do in the years to come, you're going to be very excited about how these young players play this year.
A player you just mentioned, Derek Barnett, back from a fabulous freshman campaign, and he's joined in that defensive front seven by Kurt Magid, who ranked second in the league in sacks last season. What do you expect from those two in terms of production?
Well, I mean, you can always say they're going to reach that level they did last year, but it's really going to be difficult for them to do. Both Pigeon and Barnett, they complement each other very well because they both got one strong pass rusher off each edge. But here's what's going to be the problem. They're not a secret this year to other teams. So the other teams are going to run a lot of different schemes at them. One of the things they're going to do is what's called a chip block, where the running back comes out, he comes right off the edge of the tackle, and his whole job is to stop the rush of the defensive end. You're going to see a lot more of those kinds of schemes and plays up against those guys to prevent them. The only way they're going to be able to get that level of production they got last year is if those young freshman defensive tackles can get a push, because if they don't get a push, the quarterback's just going to simply step up and you'll see Derek and Kurt go right past him. Otherwise, they got to have that push from those front 3 or 4 guys in there, and if they can get that, then those guys at the ends, they can run their pass rush and they can have a chance to get back to that level of what they got last year.
No discussion of the front seven is complete without talking the middle linebacker position. Who do you think steps up and fills A.J. Johnson's shoes there, and how important is that position for the defense?
Well, Kenny Bynum last year got the opportunity at the Tag Slayer Bowl to really be the guy. Now, does that go to he's the guy that's leading the race, or is that the guy that knows the defense the best, that the team can trust the most with what they were running at that time? Don't really know. What you're going to see this year, though, is the middle linebacker is important to the team because it's the emotional leader. It's the guy out there making the calls. He's the general. So he's got to be something that the whole team on that defense can build around and say, that's our guy. That's the guy that leads the tempo. That's the guy that calls us and challenges us in practice and causes us to raise our game. So it's not just a guy that can cover the plays there and be a body. He's got to be a guy that knows how to lead, and that may be sometimes more important than getting the best athlete on the field at that position.
At the outside linebacker position, Jalen Reeves-Maben racked up 101 tackles in 2014. Will, is he ready to take that next step and become an elite SEC linebacker this year?
There's no doubt he's ready to take that step. I can tell you why. He's one of the things that's most important to any defense, whether you know the plays or not. There's one thing we always used to say: speed makes up for a lot of mistakes. And that's what this cat has. He can come off the edge, he can cover tight ends, he can cover running backs. Basically, for an offensive coordinator, he becomes one of those guys that's hard to cover and hard to account for, because usually when you look at an outside linebacker, you say, is he a big pass rush guy or is he a cover guy? This guy can do it all. that makes it difficult because the offensive coordinator can't just say, how do we isolate this guy in a tight end or a running back because we'll get an advantage there. You don't get an advantage there. Also, this guy's going to be the guy that they're going to be able to move around and make different calls. He's the guy that they're going to try to hide and position in certain places to make big plays on a third down, on those big plays that Tennessee needs when they need to get off the field. This is a guy that's going to have a great year. He's going to be an all-SEC type player, could be an all-American type player this year.
We're done with questions now, Will. So what's your one big concern for Team 119?
Big concern for Team 119 is this: injury. Is even though you have some excellent talent coming in from these young guys and you've got a lot of guys that have improved and got better, there's still some key spots in this offense and defense where if you lose a guy, it's really going to cause you to have some issues and put some guys in bad situations where you're going to have to move a lot of guys around. So I still think for this team, the injury bug is the key, and that can happen at any time, any team, anywhere. So I think you've really got to say, who is it when we do get somebody injured? Is it at a position that we have a lot of guys there, or is it one of the positions we're very light in?
It's that time, Will. It's time to go out on a limb. What's your one bold prediction for Tennessee this season?
The one bold prediction is this: Tennessee stomps a mud hole in the Georgia Bulldogs and walks it dry. That's all I want to see this year.
Well, Will, that's sure to get you some hate mail from Bulldogs fans coming up this season. Hope you're ready for that.
Oh, I am. I'm typically ready for that. I'm always good with that. It's always good to have great rivalries in the SEC and to be able to rile the other group up anytime is a great thing to be able to do.
Well, thanks for joining us, Will. Had a blast. And that's a wrap for another edition of the 411 on Team 119, brought to you exclusively by Margaritaville and the Saint Somewhere Spa in Pigeon Forge. Make sure to check back next week for another edition of the 411 on Team 119. For Will Overstreet, I'm Reed Carringer, and thank you for watching RTI TV.